coming to you from multiple feeds across Europe, including our hopefully our feed of totality from the Faroe Islands. And I am bringing you into a great conversation that's going to be happening between Matt Francis and Paul Cox coming up. They're popping up on your screen right now. They're going to be talking to you a little bit about eclipse expeditions and how they're really an incredible sight to see.
Okay, well, thank you, Eric. Matt, welcome to the show. How are you?
Thank you, Paul. It's great to be here. Good to see you again. I'm doing
Now
great.
you're
It's a little
now
early in
you're
the morning for me, but I'm still around.
exactly. I was going to say you're talking from Arizona, aren't you? And it's 4 o'clock in the morning there or something?
It's 2 o'clock in the morning right now.
Wow. Well, thank you very much for staying up late. And we can maybe talk about why you can't see the eclipse there, but we can see the eclipse over here. But first of all, Matt, you're a bit of a veteran, aren't you? With you've got a couple of eclipses under your belt now.
I have actually one total solar
One,
eclipse under my belt
and
from
and this was Australia, was it?
yeah, exactly. That was Australia with Bob Berman. And it's funny, Paul, because before I had seen that eclipse, Bob had asked me if I had ever seen an eclipse. And like most people, I said, well, but when I was a kid in school, I saw an eclipse. And he
Mm.
asked me about it. And I kind of told him, and he said, oh, you haven't seen a total solar eclipse, or you would know exactly what I'm talking about.
Bob has said exactly the same thing to me. So, from your experience, now that you witness totality, is it really that much different to witnessing a partial eclipse versus a total eclipse?
I wouldn't even put it in the same phenomenon. It's
Right.
completely different. And as as emphatic as Bob was in his description of a total solar eclipse, you know how sometimes when people are so excited about what they're telling you, you kind of assume they're exaggerating. And
Yeah, yeah.
that's what I thought, in my head, Bob was probably doing. I didn't really expect it to be as fantastic and spectacular as he was describing. But I'll tell you, when we got to Australia and it actually happened, it was even better than what he said. It was
Wow.
beyond description.
Oh, that's amazing, Matt. And so what we've got here is this particular eclipse that we're watching today. Most of Europe can witness the partial eclipse, and that's what we're looking at the moment. We've got this live H alpha image, this special filtered image from Austria, which is pretty cool. But they're not going to see totality there. There are only two places in the world today which are going to witness totality, and that's the Faroe Islands, where I'm reporting from, and also another small group of islands, Norwegian islands called Svalbard. So this Australia eclipse that you went to, Matt, you gave us some fantastic live images. What was the build-up like? Was there a lot of kind of expectation and anticipation for this?
It was actually pretty stressful, Paul. I went out the night before the eclipse, and I set up all my equipment and I imaged the sun going down. It was rather cloudy that evening, and the forecast for the next day wasn't really that much better than the day before. So I was very nervous. Um, and we got out there before sunrise, the day of the eclipse, set up all the equipment, and there were a lot of clouds. It was very nerve wracking, and there were a lot of people hovering around my equipment on the beach.
Oh.
Yeah.
I know that feeling. I'm surrounded by my equipment, and as soon as I hear a footstep anywhere near, I start shaking and ready to jump in front of it to protect it.
Right. Exactly. You don't. I mean, you've come so far. You don't want anything to go wrong.
Yeah. Now,
And
do you think you'll go to another eclipse, which I've already decided to do? I'm going to go to an eclipse, and I'm deliberately not going to take a laptop, a camera, or anything with me. I'm just going to go with a pair of eclipse glasses, and that'll be it. You're going to do the same thing at some point, Matt?
I am. I definitely am. In fact, the eclipse that I covered in Australia, at some point, Bob asked my girlfriend Debbie to go over and make me stop working and just watch the eclipse.
No,
Which is what I did.
that's good. That's good. So when it actually reached totality, what was your reaction to that? Because I know I had a very extreme reaction actually in Kenya when I witnessed only a couple of seconds of totality, but you had a longer period of time, didn't you, in Australia?
Yeah, we did. We had quite a while, and it was. I don't even think I can describe it. What I can say is that, you know what I would say to people watching this? I would say before the eclipse, instead of talking to people and socializing, I would almost try to find a quiet spot on your own and look around, look at your environment, and really try to take in what's happening at the time. Typically we'll hear birds, we'll hear some kind of animals making noise, like usually it's birds, and just take in the kind of lighting that is in your local environment, because all of that is going to change drastically when totality comes. And I think that was it for me. It wasn't just staring at the sun with my naked eyes and seeing the spectacle there, which I don't want to say too much about that, because for all the viewers that are watching this, I don't want to describe what's about to happen. But when you're standing there, there's so many things that happen. You know, Paul. There's way more than I ever imagined. The light. Well, first of all, I thought the eclipse would be kind of like what happens at sunrise and sunset. I thought it would just be sort of dimming and then a temporary darkness.
But it's odd, isn't it? It's not a typical dawn or dusk, and that was the start, I think, of what made me feel quite strange. I didn't have anything to measure what was happening by. Is that kind of what you were going through as well?
Exactly. Yeah, there's no reference for that, right? And the lighting isn't that highly polarized light, that shimmering silvery light. It is nothing like I've ever experienced anywhere.
Hey Matt, have you take a look at this live image that we've got coming in from Svalbard at the moment? It's looking pretty good. This looks like a white light, even though it's yellow. It's visible light. That's what we're looking at from this one in Svalbard. And Svalbard are these group of islands which are close to Norway. And I'm in the Faroe Islands. These are the only two places in the world that can witness a total eclipse of the sun today, but widespread across Europe. People are witnessing various degrees of partial eclipses, from about 90% of the sun's going to be covered in Scotland down to about 40% in some of the Mediterranean countries and things like this. So, Matt, what kind of features can our viewers look forward to seeing at totality?
Features as far as the solar disk is concerned, well, the prominences are, first of all, the corona and the prominences are the most memorable things, I think, for me. The prominences were nothing like what I expected. They're nothing like what I see through my advanced solar telescopes with special filters.
I thought you'd be really used to seeing prominences. For any viewers who don't know, Matt runs the Prescott Observatory. He has some fantastic solar equipment, and Matt provides live feeds for a lot of Slooh solar shows when there are storms and sunspots and all sorts of other things going on. So Matt, I kind of assumed that, a prominence, you'd seen it through your fantastic equipment, and how could it get any better? But you're saying it was different during the total solar eclipse when you saw them.
It was very different because, for one thing, I'm not looking at a computer screen. When I use my equipment, I'm looking at the projected image onto the screen from a camera. Um, and sure that through the camera it's very detailed, and that's great. But to stand there on the ground and just look up without any equipment and see the spectacle in front of you, and the color is not what I expected. Was it what you expected, Paul, when you saw those prominences the first time in a
No,
total
it
solar
it
eclipse?
was it was a stunning, rich color that once again is so much of these eclipses is defies description, really. It was this beautiful kind of purple and pink mixed together, but it just seemed so vibrant. And the fact that it's set against the black sky, I think it gives that kind of contrast, doesn't it, that we're just not used to seeing.
Exactly. That's exactly it. It was that hot pink color that I had no idea it would be that way. And the contrast against the dark sky was just stark. It was unbelievable. Yeah, and boy, it hooked me because I can't wait to go to my next total solar eclipse.
So listen, we think we've already seen a prominence. Oh, we've got a minute and 30 seconds to go before we get first contact in Svalbard. So that's going to be interesting because different places on Earth have the eclipse at different times. So Matt, we're going to keep an eye on that. But just explain to viewers what is a prominence, because we will see one later on, because we've already seen in one of the H alpha views there is a prominence coming off the left-hand side of the sun. So what is it? What are we looking at there?
Right, we're looking at basically we're looking at magnetic field lines that are uh, they're active with active regions of the sun. What we call sunspots are active regions, and they're regions of oppositely charged magnetic polarity that are in fairly close proximity to each other. And as these magnetic field lines exit the photosphere and move out into the corona, they're drawn back in by the oppositely charged region, and they make the beautiful looping prominences that we see from a profile view on the limb of the sun. But we're actually seeing charged plasma in a magnetic field line.
And they're massive structures, aren't they? I mean, they would engulf the Earth if we were any
Oh,
closer
easily.
to it.
Yeah, exactly. Many of them are many, many times the size of a few Earths to several Earths,
Yeah,
depending on
yeah.
how large. And
Here
and
we
then
go, Matt.
go
We've
ahead.
got. Let's keep an eye on this now. Just explain to viewers what we're going to be seeing any second now in this feed. Oh no, we've flipped to another feed. We've got this one coming back. This is the live feed from Svalbard. This is going to be first contact. So for them, the eclipse is starting a little bit later. So on one edge of the sun, we need to keep an eye open for that first little chink of the moon crossing in front of the sun. So Matt, does this bring back memories of Australia?
Yeah, it does, except for it looks like in Svalbard they have clear skies, unlike what I had.
It does. Mind you, I think some of your images that you took down there for the Slooh show were beautiful. When you had the contrast of those light clouds kind of going in front, gives real depth to these images. So we are going to be keeping an eye on this Svalbard feed for that first little bite of the sun. Now, you were talking about these prominences, and they were drawn back usually into loops, back in to the sun by the magnetic field. But recently, in fact, just last week, there's been a phenomena that has been spotted on the sun called a coronal hole. Now, isn't that when the magnetic field isn't holding on to it and looping it back? What's this thing? What is a coronal hole?
Yeah, that's exactly right, Paula. So a coronal hole is
Oh, guys, So sorry to
Oh, there
interrupt,
it
but
is.
here is first contact. It's coming up right in the corner of the screen as you see it, the bottom right there. You see it coming from Svalbard. We saw it coming from Austria as well. We're seeing first contact from across Europe. This is an incredible day, I think. I'm getting our faces out of the way so we can see that in its full glory. There it is. There is that bite, and it's growing, and it's growing. And from Svalbard in particular, this is going to become totality. We are going to see the moon completely eclipse this sun. It is going to be an absolutely incredible experience. And you know what? I'm getting some weather reports from Svalbard. I'm over the moon about all this. Moon, pun intended. But hey, Svalbard is looking like such clear skies. While there's an adventure to be had from the Faroe Islands and all of this weather that we're having, all these clouds that we're struggling against, we are also being saved by our friends in NRK News who are providing this beautiful clear sky feed of what is probably going to be an incredible total solar eclipse. Absolutely.
Thank you, Eric.
Wonderful.
Thank you very much for drawing our attention to that one, and we can see it growing. This is a live video feed, and the moon is gradually moving across. Matt, how long does it take for the moon to cross the face of the sun?
That's a good question, Paul. I I don't know how long. How long? Do you know how long this eclipse will take?
Well, the moon normally moves its own diameter distance in about an hour. So that means that we tend to have, the eclipse is going to be lasting for 2 hours. So first contact, it moves over for the entire sun and then moves off. And we're going to bring everybody live images of the whole event back to coronal holes, because you monitor a lot of solar activity with your observatory, Matt. So what happened with these coronal holes, and was it connected with the geomagnetic storm, which gave us such fabulous views of the aurora in Iceland?
Yeah. So these coronal holes, we think that we're over the solar maximum, and we're starting on the downside of that. And the coronal holes typically show up more often around now, like right after solar maximum is when there are a more frequent coronal holes. And they can be basically, they're a region on the sun that is less dense, and this less dense region has a lack of opposing magnetic poles. So that's oppositely charged polarity region. And because of the lack of these opposing polar regions, there's nothing to pull these huge magnetic field lines back towards the sun. So what they do is they exit the sun and they go far out into the solar system. And they provide a kind of a super highway, if you will, for the continuous outflow of high-speed solar wind. So when a coronal hole forms and it's facing Earth, that's when we can get really, really good auroras. And I think, as you know, this particular eclipse promises to have the potential for some really spectacular auroras while the eclipse is in totality.
Right. Just looking back now on this, Matt, we're just seeing this fabulous live feed from NRK News in Svalbard. This is a white light filtered image, so you mustn't look at the sun with your eyes like this. This is taken with a camera with a big filter on it, and we can just see, if we can get our faces out of the way, we can see the moon taking this chunk out of the moon.
Nice.
Out of the sun. Now, there are a few phases. What happened when the moon first contacted the sun there is called first contact. Matt, there are a few other stages, aren't there, of an eclipse that we can look forward to here?
Yeah, totality. And I think one of the most memorable for me was right after totality, was that, people call it the diamond ring effect, but that first beam of light that just illuminates the sky again, and it's daylight, is extremely dramatic, isn't it, Paul?
It is, and that's what I witnessed in. That's what I witnessed in Kenya. I was facing the camera, so the sun was behind me on the eclipse, and I just turned around, and suddenly I saw the diamond ring, and it just literally took my breath away. Matt, thank you so much for joining us here. I know you've experienced the same thing that I have at a total solar eclipse, and really anybody who gets the opportunity to go and see a total solar eclipse, you'd say go, wouldn't you, Matt?
Oh, I would go to that above any other natural phenomenon. Yes,
Yeah,
definitely.
and you were saying from your own experience now that seeing a partial eclipse is absolutely nothing in comparison to seeing a total eclipse.
No,
They're two totally different phenomena. So if you've seen a
completely.
partial eclipse, don't think you've seen a real eclipse. Matt, thank you so much for joining us. Matt Francis, Observatory Director at the Prescott Observatory. Matt, hopefully we'll see you soon for another live show from your observatory when you're going to give us some fabulous images of the sun and solar activity. So thank you for staying up tonight and joining us.
Thank you, Paul. Good luck out there.
Thank you
Thanks,
so
Matt.
much, Matt. It was really so fun to hear what you guys were talking about, and I was just jumping up and down in my seat pretty much the whole time as we're seeing this beautiful, beautiful image of the sun that's just really progressing. And again, thank you again to our feed partners and NRK News for providing this just gorgeous look of the sun as it just slowly, slowly progresses into a totality. And so if you like events like this, if you like fighting against nature and all the odds of the clouds and weather, we have more events like these. And also we have them for even more for our members. So if you think you like Slooh like this, maybe consider joining. It's a trial offer of 30 days for just $1. Check us out at slooh.com. But I have to take us to a very quick commercial break, and we will be right back counting down towards totality right after these quick messages.